Hello, sisters before misters and bros before hoes. This is the third episode, or part three, commemorating Chyna, Joanie Laurer, for Women's History Month. Again, it's being sponsored by PPW, or Premier Pro Wrestling, and I am Randy Ritchie, and I hope you guys have enjoyed these, especially about Joanie as much as I am. So the first thing I want to say in this final, episode commemorating Joanie, addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interaction among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and the individual's life experiences. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors that become compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. So that being said, there's not a lot of ways for an addict to stay sober. He's got to watch it, And I am in recovery for 41 years, and I don't care on how now today they're trying to say, and it's never going to be official, that addiction isn't a disease. It is. When you have the latent gene or the bad gene, which I have, and Joanie had, Joanie was able to put it off for a long time because, once again, it's about the thinking. It's a thinking problem. Behaviors that become compulsive. What became compulsive for Joanie and took away the pain and the self-esteem was achieving when she finally found bodybuilding, which took her to find and excel in wrestling, and especially be on top of the business with World Wrestling Entertainment. When she was focused on working out, and I read to you guys about what was known about her and how hard she trained, she didn't have her eyes open for anything else, and it kept her emotional instability at bay. A lot of people wanted to bury World Wrestling Entertainment. A lot of people want to bury Triple H or, Paul Levesque. And a lot of people want to bury Sean Waltman, or X-Pac, who was part of DX, in case you don't know. I've known Sean Waltman since he was, first breaking into the industry with Jerry Lynn out of Minneapolis via Ed Sharkey. I've known Sean Waltman since Baron von Raschke, the great Baron von Raschke, encouraged him and Jerry Lynn to stay in this industry in spite of their size at the time. The Baron knew that the industry was changing, and he knew that there was something in both of those guys, and particularly Sean Waltman, who had more charisma, so to speak. He was more outgoing than Jerry was when they were younger, which led to him learning the art of politics. Now, being an addict and an alcoholic and being in recovery 41 years, I know from what I see that whatever one addict is capable of under the influence, as am I. That being said, and I hope that you guys go ahead and watch it because it'll really give you a lot to think about and a lot of food for thought. The Gary Oldman movie called Sid and Nancy, about Sid Vicious, there was some parts about the Sex Pistols and all that, of course. But it was specifically about Sid Vicious, and when Sid Vicious found heroin via his girlfriend, Nancy, and I forget Nancy Spungen, and how fast that happened, Now, I am not going to blame Waltman or Chyna for turning the other one on to hard drugs, But I do know, my point being about Sid and Nancy is that two addicts together in the throes of their disease is not going to play out well. And to watch that movie and to watch it historically, how it isn't that much an exaggeration or drama based upon that horrible relationship that two addicts with a little bit of money and fame have, you know. I know that's something that I'm capable of myself, you know. And I want to read to you guys what Sean said. Oh, to hell with it. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to tell you what he said. When she passed, his statement was that he'll always love her and he hopes that he can be forgiven for not taking better care of her. And at the end of the day, there's nothing we can do. And a lot of you guys know what I'm talking about insofar as helping another addict, especially when you're an addict and you are that close. But Sean Waltman has a good heart. And I've heard that Sean's in recovery, and Sean would be in recovery because he wouldn't be achieving to the level that he is right now if he hadn't been, you know. That's a good person. As Chyna was a good person, an extraordinary person. But the bottom line to it is that the addict and alcoholic is not capable of much when he's in the throes or she is in the throes of the disease. Do you understand what I'm saying, guys? So I don't want to end this on a bad note. You know, I just hope that some people may take a little bit of notice in regards to, you know, addiction because it's so prominent today. Here's something that I didn't know in case you guys were trying to blame World Wrestling Entertainment at all. It's believed Chyna's downward spiral may have begun in 2001 when the WWE offered her a new contract for $400,000. She refused to sign it and reportedly wouldn't accept anything less than $1 million. Joanie said a few years later that she regretted it. Here's something that I wish the internet would wake up to, and wrestling fans that are quote-unquote in the know would wake up to. A $400,000 downside or guarantee for WWE at the end of the day when you're strategic partnering with that company comes out to $1 million. Now, I could see addicts and alcoholics are very sensitive, oversensitive people. I know goddamn well I am. That they were throwing around some guarantees at the time, and Chyna took that personal instead of being able to see the big picture. But she couldn't see the big picture unless she was in recovery. So the point I'm trying to make is that she probably took that as a diss, as I would have myself if I was in the throes of the disease. But, you know, knowing what I know now, you know, that was pretty good because at the end of the day, that's what you do with World Wrestling Entertainment, you know. You end up being strategic partners. She would have made her $1 million. It was just about the addict and alcoholic who is described as the egomaniac with the inferiority complex, you know. It's personal choice. It's nobody else's fault. And we can't blame anyone on our disease for our disease. We certainly can't get sober until we accept our personal decisions in the disease, you know. And a lot of treatment centers today are just cash grabs, you know. This one's high rated, that one's high rated. Let me tell you just briefly how that stuff works. It's like this, Angie's List. Angie's List used to be a good company or a good resource when you were looking for just about anything. God, now that I think about it today, they probably have treatment centers on Angie's List. But like everything, as it grew, it became corrupt, you know. They used to say, go on Angie's List to find good help, you know, for whatever was needed. You know, around your home, specifically in the beginning. People you could trust. Well, it's not like that, and it didn't stay like that for long. Anybody that pays to be on Angie's List, now you pay to be on Angie's List, it's no longer word of mouth, is recommended. So they don't know these people, but they know that when their check clears, okay, we endorse them. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, as far as that goes, you know, it's a crapshoot. But at the end of the day, I have helped and worked with so many addicts, and maybe I have helped some because I have to work with addicts and alcoholics that are suffering to stay sober myself. But in the same token, I've lost a lot more than I've helped. And the two that passed away that were closest to me, actually three, but I'll tell you about two, was my best friend at the time who had been battling addiction for years. He finally got 90 days together and said, "You guys are right, this works. I'm happier than I've ever been." And then with no rhyme or reason, he went out the next day and scored some heroin. Then that night he was going to stay at my house, and we were going to figure out the next day, once he slept it off, if we were going to take him to his 30th treatment center or just spend the day in meetings, because they couldn't teach him anything in treatment that he didn't already know. And I thought that I had him searched, and I thought that everything was cool. Then I woke up in the morning, and I found his empty Monster can in the bathroom without the old screw-on cap on one of those large Monsters they used to have. Well, heroin addicts in particular, and meth addicts that shoot, love those caps because they heat up their shit in that cap and liquefy it before they shoot it. And I saw that there was no cap there, and when I went in, I found my friend dead and called 911 as I tried to revive his dead body. That will be with me for the rest of my life. I gave the eulogy at his funeral, and there was my, at the time, 20-year-old niece with me at the funeral. She was in the throes of, she was battling it. She was trying to stay sober, and then the next day she wasn't, and she was on methadone, you know. And I sat with her and said, "Look at him, look at Brett here, but look at the pain his death is causing the family. You know, his then 3-year-old son, his son's mother, his parents, you know." I said, "Try to consider that. It might help you get the willingness. And what you got to do is you got to become compulsive as Joanie was with weights and nutrition, as and also with drugs. You got to get that compulsive about sobriety, you know." So you can't blame anyone. And Sean Waltman can't blame himself because he couldn't have done anything for her, you know, to save her. And something that was brought up to me recently, and this was a cardiologist, you know, I mean, a 5-star world-class cardiologist. He said, "You know, there's worse things than dying from addiction or alcoholism." And I never thought of that before. But he said, yeah, he had a friend who hadn't crossed the line. But when the COVID pandemic hit and he was stuck at home, he hit it hard. He was already drinking, but he focused on his drinking because he had nothing else to be compulsive about. And just drinking, no drugs. Well, this man ended up seizing, and he will never be the same. There's worse things, you know, there's blackouts. And in a blackout, you don't know what the hell you're going to do, and you could end up in prison for the rest of your life and kill somebody close to you or kill somebody at all. You see what I'm saying? So I'm not going to go ahead and say that it's a good thing anybody passes away from the disease. But when my niece passed away, one of her little friends that I ran into, who had been friends with her since they went to Christian grade school together, said, "The way I look at what happened to your niece is it might have been sympathy from God." I'm like, what? But I didn't say that because everybody hurts and grieves in their own way. And she said, yeah, she never would have been the same because she'd passed that point with addiction where she would have been physically and mentally maimed. And she was. She was, and I never thought of it that way, you know. And that brings me to Mick Foley. You know, Mick Foley, Mankind, Dude Love, Cactus Jack. He's one hell of an individual. And he is so gifted with his words. He always comes up with something to say in addition to his actions. But his words can bring people so much peace. And I've seen it happen. He's actually brought me some of that. What a good person. And here's what he said, and this is why I told you everything I said up to this point. That was the build-up for this. I pray that somehow in death you can find the peace that eluded you so frequently during the latter years of your remarkable life. I mean, isn't that fucking beautiful? It's not just me and being friends with him or whatever, me man crushing on Mick Foley. It's fucking beautiful, and that's how I think Joanie should be remembered, you know? At the end of the day, she had a remarkable life, and she was a pioneer who paved the way for so many sports entertainers, particularly women in pro wrestling. No woman had ever achieved the star power that she had, and she earned that shit. Nobody ever handed Joanie Laurer anything. So in closing, as we finish this thing off, if you are an addict, alcoholic yourself, the things that you hear do work, but you have to want it. You know, and you have to be as compulsive about your recovery as you are about using drugs or anything else you've been compulsive about. If you know or love an addict, alcoholic, know your limitations. Take care of yourself. Know that they are sick, but you've got to take yourself out of harm's way at a certain point and can only do so much for them. And please, if you are a parent or a guardian, protect your children from the disease. You know, I have the bad gene, and I didn't waste any time fucking with that. Joanie had other things in her life, and I can tell she was probably like, I'm never going to end up like my mother or my father. I used to say the same shit, but girlfriend kept herself so busy and achieved so much that when that latent gene finally did come out, she was a slave to it, you know? I don't think that there should be any heat or blame or responsibility with anybody in regards to Joanie's passing. And everything happens for a reason. You know, Joanie Laurer happened for a reason, you know? So look and learn and take the good and use it, and also in anything that you do, not just wrestling, but also know that people like her, if she can do it, if you want to bad enough and you can dedicate yourselves the same way Joanie Laurer did, there's no reason in the world you can't do it. Okay. Again, sponsored by Premier Pro Wrestling. Women wrestlers, you should know. And it's coming to you commercial free, so please like, subscribe, and at least peruse the links below. You'll see descriptions on how to support Premier Pro Wrestling.